When we got started, it was only a matter of let's do some literature to undergird the campus work. It was really begun, I think, for the training and encouragement of the Christian students in the chapters.
I mean, we started out using things that the British had, and then we moved into trying to find people in North America.
In the early 40s, a lot of men were going off to war, and so InterVarsity looked to women to help fill in some of the need for campus ministry, and Jane Hollingsworth was one of those people.
In her early 20s, and she was a pretty tough person. I mean, I read some of the stuff that she said about other staff and students, and kind of a wimp's, kind of attitude. So she was an expert from theological training and doing inductive Bible studies.
She really felt the need for inductive Bible study guides that could be used with students. And so she told Stacey Woods, who was heading up InterVarsity at the time, that that's what was needed. And so Stacey, in his brusque manner, said, well, Jane, go write some. And so she did. And that actually became IVP's first publication by an American author, discovering the Gospel of Mark.
And I think it was in that context that he ran into the kinds of questions that students have about Christianity, and asking that question, is Christianity credible?
My Heart Cries Home, as I recall, came out, and that was our bestseller for years.
Many, many conversions and rededications of life have happened because of that little pamphlet.
One of my heroes of the faith is John Stott. In my own career in publishing, I've had the privilege of getting to know John personally, publish a book or two by him. But I would say it all started with InterVarsity.
Paul Little was an InterVarsity staff, and yet his contribution in How to Give Away Your Faith has been used throughout the church in training people in personal evangelism.
Francis Schaeffer opened up a window for many of us, and it was really an important role that Jim Sire played in bringing to birth some of those early books.
Knowing God was extremely influential because it pointed the church back to a real solid engagement and understanding of the nature of God.
The Fight by John White. It was so important to me at the time. It presented Christianity as worth the struggle, that spiritual growth was worth the fight for it.
I got a second letter saying, we're going to go ahead with this. We don't know if it'll sell. Somehow I think we're going to do 5,000 copies, and maybe in 10 years we'll still have 4,000 copies on skids in our basement, but we think it needs to be out there.
Really moved people's sense of personal evangelism away from a kind of formulaic approach.
And I think about 15 minutes after I had started reading it, I said to Jim, send contract immediately.
And I remember thinking, I'm either going to pray less as just a private Christian and as a leader, or because so many things are encroaching my time, I'm going to make a commitment to pray more.
And when he then began to question evolutionary naturalism, he found that he got attention by all kinds of people outside the church.
More Than Equals by Chris Rice and Spencer Perkins.
Just their personal story of a friendship across racial lines, of working and struggling together.
Dr. Tim Johnson's book, Finding God in the Questions. That just says it all to me, is what InterVarsity Press has done, is it's allowed people to ask questions.
Logos Bookstore started in the late 1960s in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It was really birthed out of InterVarsity Press and InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and a desire to have books of substance, like IVP was doing in those years and continues to do today, available in bookstores on university campuses.
Ultimately, at the peak of the number of stores, there were 82, I'm told, and they were near campuses all over the country and in Canada as well.
I remember walking through a Christian bookstore in the 70s and coming on one of those IVP spinner racks.
I remember it had at the top of the rack, it had images of Rebecca Manley Pippert, of John White, John Stott, and Calvin Miller.
Today, the racks are much more attractive, less obtrusive, and more efficient in storing books, but still keeping covers face out, which is the whole point of a rack.
The guides were introduced in 1985 and almost immediately became the top-selling series in the industry.
One of the challenges for retailers was to display them well. Bible studies in those days, virtually all of them were staple bound, or what in publishing parlance is called saddle stitched, and they didn't have a spine. And so IVP really took the lead in developing a merchandiser that
would hold 8 Bible study guides and show them face out in a slanted format so that people could see the titles. This became very popular throughout the industry as other publishers began to adopt similar formats.
We are very committed to what we believe is our calling in almost a unique way to be a thoughtful Christian publisher that publishes books that make a significant contribution to the kingdom of God.
Without IVP, we're not reminded as much of how important that thoughtful, engaging the mind aspect is.
There's been some discernment here. Someone screened this author, someone screened this material. This is going to be a significant contribution to the kingdom in some way.
You know, it's one thing to survive 60 years. It's another thing to be a contributor for 60 years. And what's exciting to me is to hear some of the new titles and new concepts. And I believe that IVP is on the threshold of their best years. So it isn't the last 60, it's the next 60.